Thank you everyone for joining us today, either live or on download afterwards. My name is Doug Lynch and I oversee the global sales and marketing for Valensa. Want to introduce my colleagues.
Hi, I'm Steve Hill, Vice President of Product Development.
I'm Larry McCarty, Vice President of Production and Supply Chain.
I'm Dr. John Minatelli, former Senior Vice President of Business Development for Valensa International, now acting as a consultant.
And we want to welcome you today to share the very latest regarding saw palmetto. And we're going to discuss today the size of the market, the science that drives the substantiation, and the purity that drives the efficacy, and ultimately the sustainability issues and initiatives that Valensa has undertaken to protect consumers and to protect the annual harvest. So a little brief information about who Valensa is. We were founded back in 1999, so our roots go back to Deshay. Our original name was US Nutraceuticals, and we're located in Eustis, Florida, about an hour outside of Orlando. And we've really been focusing on a number of initiatives. Our parent company has been focusing on a number of initiatives since 1977. So the timeline goes considerably farther back, and primarily that focuses on microalgae. We are vertically integrated, and to be sure, saw palmetto, astaxanthin, spirulina, chlorella, these are ingredients that are very near and dear to our heart. We perform quite extensive, rigorous scientific analysis, and to be sure, we have the highest quality in terms of approval. Very focused on intellectual property. We make sure that our ingredients are formulated often together, that they're synergistic, that they address a market need, and they actually provide solutions. Our core focus are in men's health, which is one reason why saw palmetto is so close and near and dear to our hearts. Joint health, eye health, superfoods, and immunity are the areas that are Valensa's core expertise. And we focus on dietary supplements, functional foods, cosmetic actives, and pharmaceutical formulations. And you can see on the right-hand side of the slide some of our microalgae ponds where we are growing astaxanthin and spirulina, respectively. So down here and local in Eustis, Florida, this is where our core extraction expertise is brought to bear. It's not only our corporate headquarters, but it is an actual manufacturing facility, and it is the only ultra-high pressure supercritical CO2 extraction facility in North America. There are absolutely no co-solvents that are used, and we only use natural antioxidants for preservatives, and we're quite good at that. And many of our extracts actually have over 2 years shelf life in our commercial products. It is a very superior extraction methodology. It allows us to actually extract the highest amount of active ingredients, and we're going to show you a demonstration of that later in the presentation. We consider it, and our customers consider a very whole food type of an extraction, because we're not touching any of the solvents that are certainly more questionable in North America use, although some solvents in this area overseas. And we believe it is the most natural and highest quality way to actually approach our formulations, whether they be saw palmetto or astaxanthin. And we're able to actually get out the high molecular weight compounds through that process. We are a certified organic facility, US FDA and CGMP. So switching a little bit gears now in terms of what we're here to talk about, which is the saw palmetto berries that we're actually here as our Florida gems. And the Latin name for saw palmetto, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of the market right now. The Latin name is Serenoa repens, but also historically there have been some references in a Latin name, particularly in Europe, to Sabal cerulata. Sorry, my Latin isn't up to snuff. The thing about this berry is that it's indigenous to Florida and the southeastern states, and to be sure, commercially, Florida is the real hub. for the source of our saw palmetto extracts. This is key because you should know, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it during this presentation, that it does not grow in China, it does not grow in India, and it does not grow commercially in Central or South America. So this is key when you're starting to wonder whether or not your saw palmetto extract is legitimate. But in terms of its relationship to this area, to the Florida area, goes back quite some time. It was used by Native Americans for centuries. And then you fast forward to a little more recent history. In the early 1900s, that's when the pharmaceutical industry started to get a part of the saw palmetto story. And again, the roots to Florida go extremely far back with Eli Lilly's efforts in 1907. The other thing that took place of note right around the same time is that saw palmetto was included in the USP. And we're going to talk a lot about USP in this presentation because it is a differentiation point between what is shown to be efficacious saw palmetto extracts and what is very unsubstantiated or frankly adulterated product. In 1946, natural medicine was replaced by modern prescription drugs in the United States, but conversely, in 1950s, natural medicine gained popularity in much of the EU. And some of the pharmaceutical companies that jumped into the saw palmetto world are listed on this slide. And they standardized saw palmetto extract and registered them as drugs. And to this day, they are still sold as drugs in many countries in the EU. And with regard to that, the primary EU indication is BPH, or benign prostate hyperplasia, a condition that Dr. Minatelli will give a little more clarification as the presentation goes along. And that traditionally has been what it's been used for, but more recently, there's been a lot of focus on it on other applications, such as androgenic alopecia, when it comes to DHT inhibition. So here's some of annual harvest that is taking place very timely to this presentation I'm giving today, because it's actually going on right now. The berries are actually hand-picked, and they're harvested from late August through October each and every year. And this is a Florida story, and for Valensa, it starts in Florida and it really ends here because we do our extraction here in our supercritical that I mentioned previously. The total market size of saw palmetto extract to be, the estimates are 65 million in the US, and the global data is approximately 150 million. Now, as a finished product, the trick of this is that most saw palmetto products actually are in finished brands. So it's a little bit tricky to find exactly how large it is on the finished product size. And it's difficult to extrapolate that market, but we do expect that value to be 3 to 5 times the B2B. So you're looking at a number certainly close to 500 million. The total BPH market itself, which again contains the drugs and as well as the dietary supplements that target that indication, that's quite a bit larger. It's 2.5 billion globally, and U.S. accounts for 50% of it. So it's very, very clear that it's a condition that is suffered by many people. In fact, the comment is when you get to a certain age as a man, the chances are quite strong that you're going to have it. It's just a matter of when. But all of this has created a very lucrative market because the berries are sold by the pound. It's a cash business, and that has really encouraged a poaching climate. So people are actually going onto private lands, and they're actually taking the berries off of the palms, and as a result of it, you've got a situation where landowners are becoming extremely wealthy. In addition to that, it has created a cottage industry of a saw palmetto powder, which is not, in fact, saw palmetto extract. And this saw palmetto powder, which is coming from green unripened berries, are ineffective and certainly have not been shown to be substantiated for any indication whatsoever. And so all of this working together has created a climate that is really challenging sustainability itself of this industry when it comes to saw palmetto. And certainly this is the reason we're all gathered around to talk about the activities that we're doing from Valensa's perspective to help to sustain this business. So again, sustainability is what brings us here. There are factors that are confusing the consumer, frankly, and we are out to set the issues right. Some of the issues that are very key to what is and what is not considered efficacious product. What kind of extraction methodology are you using? And we'll go into it in pretty great detail. Everybody says, well, this is an extract. Well, the definition has many definitions, but what we find when it comes to efficacy, the definition is considerably smaller and more narrow. So we're going to make sure that consumers ultimately start to understand the differences in what is in fact called an extract. The other issue is adulteration. This is something that my colleague Dr. Minatelli actually a year ago gave a webinar just on this very issue, because adulterated products were coming into the market at an accelerated state. And unfortunately, that has not really slowed down. So efforts to make sure that you are dealing with the actual pure extract are core initiatives that we're taking here at Valensa. And then again, unsubstantiated green berry powder. So many dietary supplements, if you go to the market, if you go on the shelf and you turn the ingredient label around, you're going to find that it's not a saw palmetto extract in these products at all. They're listed as saw palmetto berry powder. And once again, efficacy is actually tied towards the extracts and a very specific kind. In addition to those issues, there are supply issues that address each and every year, from the practices of the harvesting itself. And let's not forget Mother Nature, because the timing of the saw palmetto harvest happens to coincide with a little thing that happens here every year in Florida called hurricane season. And definitely, if we do not have the contingencies built up to withstand the climate impact, it will affect each and every harvest. So Valensa has taken great lengths to make sure that we have redundancies in our manufacturing processes just in case we get greeted by a Category 3 or Category 4 storm. In addition, global demand. I mean, the product actually, when it's the actual product, when it's the authentic saw palmetto berry extract, it really works. And as a result of that, the world's caught on with it. Many countries have kind of liberalized their regulatory status in the past few years, which is becoming a situation where we're supplying out of Florida the rest of the world. So we have to make sure that this crop is protected each and every harvest moving forward. And just one little comment on the slide, our bear friend in the lower right-hand corner, the animals and wildlife within Florida, they really rely on crops like this. And it helps to protect them, it helps to provide shelter, it helps to provide food. So we need to make sure that we're doing, for the long term, the protection of this very important Florida gem, the saw palmetto berry. And so all of this is really leading towards a situation that the government itself is starting to act. They're starting to understand how they too must protect this Florida gem. And the government is finally making moves in this regard, and you might have seen that there have been some developments with regard to permits that are required to actually harvest the berries at this point in time. We at Valensa are really supporting the state in these efforts, because we believe that these are first steps, truly first steps to help to protect the crop. And you'll see also that if you see some press releases, you'll see that our crop has been actually declared fresh from Florida, and that's a status that is actually reserved in many cases for citrus crops that come here. So the government is responding. We believe that these are all positive efforts that will ultimately lead towards a sustainable harvest each and every year. And with that, I would like to pass the baton over to Dr. Minatelli, who's going to talk a little bit about the science.
Hi, folks. I'm glad you've joined us today, and I'm going to key off of one of Doug's presentation points, and that was the availability of powdered products in a dietary supplement market, which include powdered saw palmetto. And I want to preface my presentation here, which emphasizes the mode of action of authentic saw palmetto extracts and also the clinical results from authentic saw palmetto extracts by the fact that there have been no reported powdered product-based clinical trials anywhere in the world. So we have in the powdered product, which generally provides about 50%, up to 50% of the total market demand in the United States, has absolutely zero substantiation. So we're going to focus on the real product, which is the lipophilic extract of saw palmetto. What's very interesting about saw palmetto is it's a very unique phytochemical source of high oleic, myristic, and lauric acids. These have been shown to be non-competitive inhibitors of 5-alpha reductase. And because 5-alpha reductase is inhibited, we can expect and do see anti-androgenic and anti-proliferative activity. But in addition to this, saw palmetto extracts also exhibit anti-inflammatory properties by downregulating some important inflammatory cytokines, only two of which are mentioned here, interleukin-1 beta and TNF-alpha in human prostate tissues. Saw palmetto extracts also exhibit potent blockade of alpha-adrenergic, muscarinic, and 1,4-dihydropyridine receptors. And I won't spend a lot of time on this from a mechanistic point of view, but in one example with 5-alpha reductase, we see that 5-alpha reductase merely transforms testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, which is many times more potent a hormone than testosterone is itself. When the dihydrotestosterone reaches the androgen receptor, it promotes prostate-specific antigen expression, cellular proliferation, and reduces cellular apoptosis. And this is why excessive amounts of DHT in older age men produces an enlarged prostate. And that enlarged prostate is responsible for the lower urinary tract symptoms that are associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia, which we'll talk about when we review these clinical trials. So the important message here is that this phytochemical source provides multiple modes of action. Clinical meaningful efficacy in trials using standardized saw palmetto extraction formulations has really taught us a lot. Fundamentally, at its core, these extracts increase peak urinary flow rate, which is called Qmax, very consistently across the saw palmetto group compared to placebo arms. It lowers the international prostate score with mean change from baseline for the saw palmetto group being sufficient for patients to perceive a clinically meaningful improvement in their LUTS symptoms. And it also reduces nocturia with comparable efficacy to products like tamsulosin and or short-term use of alpha reductase inhibitors like finasteride. There is a preponderance of clinical evidence for authentic saw palmetto extracts with respect to scientific peer-reviewed articles. And we've shown here on these two graphs that over 65% of these relate to positive results of the 144 relevant articles that we've looked at. And of those, 111 of these articles relate specifically to clinical trials. There have been some very notable saw palmetto clinical trials, and I don't want to characterize all of them. There are over 98 clinical trials, maybe over 100 at this point in time. But I did want to point out these 6 more specifically. All of these studies used standardized saw palmetto extracts for the treatment of LUTs associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia. It's important to recognize that a man can have lower urinary tract symptoms that are not associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia, and I'll come back to that issue in just a moment. Gerber has shown in a random clinical trial that saw palmetto led to statistically significant improvement in urinary symptoms in men with lower urinary tract symptoms compared with the placebo arm. That was done in 2001. In 2015, in a similar RCT, patients with evidence of inflammation responded better to saw palmetto extract than others. You may recall that DHT concentrations are important from an androgenic point of view. The more androgenic activity you have, the more likely you are to have inflammation, the more likely you are to have cellular hypertrophy, which is another fancy word for saying prostate enlargement. These are all related to the inflammatory process. Alcaraz also did an RCT and showed that saw palmetto extract formula showed an equivalent efficacy to the very popular alpha adrenergic blockers, as well as 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, but with fewer side effects. So there are sexual side effects associated with common therapeutic medications that are used here in the United States. Novara has done a beautiful job of doing a meta-analysis on permixin, which is a hexane extract and probably the leading extract used throughout Europe. And they've shown that through this meta-analysis, decreased nocturnal voiding, a max comparable with placebo, and had efficacy in relieving lower urinary tract symptoms similar to tamsulosin, which is an alpha blocker, or short-term finasteride, which is one of the leading products used for 5-alpha reductase inhibition. In 2018, Moringa also conducted a random clinical trial where the results indicated treatment with saw palmetto extract formula was not inferior to Cialis, which is called Tadalafil, at 5 milligrams as a co-therapy for improving the international symptom scores and also flow rates for men with lower urinary tract symptoms associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia. And finally, in another 2018 paper, Vela Navarrete reviewed RCTs with saw palmetto and indicated that saw palmetto appears to be an efficacious and well-tolerated therapeutic option to long-term medical treatment of lower urinary tract symptoms associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia without undesirable sexual side effects. So all of these and many, many other clinical trials make it clear that the product is effective for the treatment of lower urinary tract symptoms associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia. Now, in 2006 and 2011, there were 2 major government-sponsored clinical trials that stepped into the limelight. One of those, and in both cases, the authors concluded that saw palmetto is not superior to placebo, even under an escalating dose clinical scenario. But there were major issues with both the STEP and CAMUS trials. But because they were published in major journals like the Journal of the American Medical Association and the New England Journal of Medicine, they received glorious accolades. However, if you look closely at the trials, the most significant shortfalls of the trial is a lack of confirmed LUTs due to benign prostatic hyperplasia in the majority of participants in both studies. In other words, when in the STEP trial, although prostate glands were actually measured, the size was measured, and in the CAMUS trials, the size was not measured. even in the STEP trial, the majority of participants did not have benign prostatic hyperplasia. In other words, they did not have enlarged prostates. And for lack of a better way of saying it, unless you have LUTs associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia, knowing the mechanism of action, one would not expect that saw palmetto extracts would be effective for the treatment of LUTs that are not associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia. In addition, no positive control arms to test the placebo group response rate using an approved drug therapy were employed in any of these trials. And the extracts in both trials were not adequately characterized. Stephen will talk a little bit more about the significance of that particular statement. And finally, there was no pre-screening to eliminate positive placebo responders. So whenever you run a trial like this, there are positive responders, and they have to be eliminated before randomization occurs. And this has not been done in this particular case. So although many people have looked at the STEP and CANVAS trials as definitive trials that indicate that saw palmetto does not work, the reality is that they were poorly designed. Based on all the clinical evidence from well-designed studies, standardized high-quality saw palmetto extracts like US Plus, which is a product which we make here, should be incorporated as a first-line therapy for mild to moderate LUTs associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia, as it is in Europe. Now, in 2018, a meta-analysis was done by Navarro on permixin clinical trials. Permixin is a hexanic extract of saw palmetto, and when you compare our CO2 extract to the permixin product, they're essentially equivalent with respect to their physiochemical characteristics. This data including 15 RCTs and 12 observational studies, where the product was compared to a placebo. And what was found was that hexanic extract was associated with fewer voids per night and an additional mean increase in Qmax, or flow rate, of 2.7 mils per second. When compared to alpha blockers, permixin showed similar improvements in IPA scoring and a comparable increase in Qmax with tamsulosin, which in the United States is really the first line of therapy, an alpha blocker. Efficacy assessed using IPAs was similar after 6 months of treatment between permixin and 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, such as finasteride or duosteride. Analysis of all available published data for permixin showed a mean improvement of IPAS scoring from the baseline of a negative 5.73 points. It did not negatively affect sexual function, and there were no clinically relevant effects observed on prostate-specific antigen. Prostate volume decreased slightly, and similar efficacy results were seen in patients who were treated for over 1 year with a subject level of 447. You might note that the entire meta-analysis included a total of 5,800 patients. So this was not a trivial meta-analysis by any means. Permixin has a very favorable safety profile, with gastrointestinal orders being the most frequent adverse events that have been reported, but the incidence is very low. And you might expect that because these are free fatty acid phytoextracts. Now, what's important about this analysis is not only are these products effective, but they're much safer to use than finasteride or things like tamsulosin, because the prostate volume really does not decrease in these studies to any significant level, and there is no effect on sexual performance, which is a very problematic issue with both alpha-adrenergic blockers and potent alpha-adrenergic receptors antagonists. So we can conclude from the present analysis, which includes all available RCTs and observational studies for permixin, that permixin reduced noxuria, improved flow rates compared with placebo, and had efficacy which was very similar to tamsulosin and short-term 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. in relieving lower urinary tract symptoms associated with benign prostatic hyperplasia. So we can conclude that standardized sulfur extracts show promise for the treatment of benign prostatic hyperplasia, and in fact, the leading product in Europe has very similar physiochemical characteristics to the products that are produced here at Valensa International. I'm going to now turn it over to Stephen Hill.
Thanks, John. And of course, the key point of what John was saying is that all these positive clinical trials were conducted with high quality extracts. And so, unfortunately, in the United States, the dietary supplement market includes a lot of non-equivalent products, including green, unripe berries, which are ground up and put into capsules, or various extracts, which are economically adulterated or diluted. Now, our goal is to set the standard in the market, for testing and validating and verifying quality and purity of our products. And a big portion of that is done by vertical integration to control quality. Now, this includes saw palmetto berry purchasing, raw material sourcing, but also here in our Florida CGMP facility, where we do high pressure CO2 extraction to create a clean extract, which is a total extract of a ripe berry. Now, this extract is going to be about 8 to 10 times the potency of a green berry, which is typically found in a capsulated cheap product. So this next slide, you'll see that high pressure CO2 is equivalent to solvents like hexane, which are used in the European phytotherapies to get out all the compounds in the saw palmetto. Now, this includes not only the lipids, the fatty acids, which are a common product in the specification, but also things like carotenoids, your long chain alcohols, and also a lot of your what they call unspecifiable matter in the USP specification. Now, your ethanol products or your low pressure CO2 will get out less of these other phytochemicals, which are part of the overall therapy of the product. Now, what we see in the marketplace a lot is adulterated products, and sometimes even simple things such as color aren't found in these products. We've seen different products which are either clear or black, when a true saw palmetto oil will become an orange or a brown color. And saw palmetto even has a characteristic sharp odor, and a lot of adulterated products just smell like regular vegetable oil. Now, looking at the chemistry of the oil, the key point is the free fatty acids, and that does make an acidic oil. Because what's key is a lot of the mechanistic in vitro work that's been done on 5-alpha reductase has shown that it is the free fatty acids, namely your lower chimeristic acids, which cause the effect. And this is what takes us back to the ratio of free fatty acids. We'll see later on, there's a particular identity monograph that looks at these fatty acids, as well as things like phytosterols, long chain alcohols. And these are the key points you want to see in a true saw palmetto extract. Now, we look at a lot of products in the marketplace. We do have a free testing service where our customers can send us extracts that they've been offered by other folks. And the first tip from these people is that the low price they're being offered on saw palmetto extract is much lower than even the costs of berries in the marketplace. And right away, that's an indication that the product is not going to be effective, and that's because it's not true saw palmetto extract. And almost every sample I think we've seen that's coming from offshore has been found to have very little characteristics of true saw palmetto extract as well. And these products typically have just a claim of a total fatty acid specification, which any vegetable oil can meet, or they just mention a extraction ratio. They may say 10 to 1, 8 to 1, what have you, and not really talk about the chemistry behind the product. Now, the USP has long had a monograph of saw palmetto extract, and this helps set key parameters for identity. Now, part of this is what they call the lauric acid ratio. So you have all the various fatty acids which are found in the extract set against the amount of lauric acid, and they do have ranges. And this is able to catch most of the adulterated products that we see, as you'll see in the right-hand column on typical imported extract, things such as caproic acid, linolenic acid, and myristic acid don't meet the lauric acid ratio, and right away that tells you that they're probably adulterated. Now, free fatty acids is a really important component, again, because this is part of the mechanism by which it works. And typical vegetable oils are neutral oils and have almost no free fatty acids. But sulfur is unique and then has an active lipase, which creates this high level of free fatty acids and helps make it effective. And US Plus and the typical European products will have 70–80% free fatty acids, where a lot of true products, as you'll see here, about 20–30% free fatty acids, very, very low. And phytosterols, you definitely want to see at least 0.2% in a product. Of course, this is very easy for people to cheat because soybean phytosterols are very readily available on the market. But long-chain alcohols are another characteristic parameter. We usually see about 0.15, 0.2% in a product. And also, since sulfur is quite a saturated fat, the peroxide value of a true product will typically be very low and not rancid, as you've seen here in this extract, which is quite high, around 6 milliequivalents. Now, we'll go into the gems part, and I'll hand off to my colleague, Larry McCarty.
Steve, it's my pleasure to be here to speak about our gems. Valensa's mission with gems is to produce the highest quality, truly sustainable, and most efficacious salt tomato extract in support of prostate health. That is our mission, that is a long-term view, and that's what we do every day. Our commitment is anchored in 4 pillars: traceability from landowners through to our customers, consumers, with proper salt pimento berry oil; sustainability and harvesting with respect to our environment and wildlife while meeting the needs of supplement industry and our consumers; purity and the highest quality of natural mature berry oil; and responsibility to our value chain partners and for highest ethical practices. Our extract purity is controlled by our harvest practices, our carefully controlled supercritical CO2 extraction and processing under GMP conditions, then tested and verified by our laboratory to comply with USP monograph in terms of oil and fatty acid profile, as Steve has already detailed out for you. Valensa is a committed leader to improve the salt pimento industry and fully support the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services efforts with harvest permit regulation and promotes responsible and ethical harvesting. Valensa's US Plus salt pimento extract has been recognized as fresh from Florida as an agricultural product. Landowners are essential partners as owners of the salt pimento berries. Long-term partnership with owners optimizes practices and provides value reliability to all stakeholders, which leads to consistency of supply. Tracking berry lots from harvest through processing is an important control. Valensa is pursuing vertical integration for better control across the value chain for salt pimento. Valensa takes the high road in all of our business activities and our interactions with communities where we operate. We have a long-term view to ensure all members of our salt pimento value chain, from landowners through consumers, are fully valued in the sustained salt pimento industry. Valensa partners with American Herbal Products Association and the American Botanical Council to develop, improve, and utilize best practices for harvest workers and ecosystems for salt pimento. Improved salt pimento practices for salt pimento berries is vital to our industry. We at Valensa are committed to continuous improvement of industry practices. Valensa is leading collaboration with University of Florida scientists to leverage insights that support our landowners and provide science-based decision-making to our state government representatives. With that, I want to turn it back to Doug.
Thank you very much for spending some time with us today to talk about the issues that surround the saw palmetto extract and the harvest and the efforts that we're taking to protect them. And we're going to talk a little bit more at Supply Side West, and we wanted to welcome you to join us on November 8th at the center stage at 3 o'clock, because we're going to be working with Informa and the American Botanicals Council. Professor Mark Blumenthal will be on the panel, as will Dr. Ken Redcross, who is a board-certified internal medicine and a physician and author. And we will be talking about really the issues that run the gamut, the things that we've talked about today, such as the efforts we're working with the state to really help to protect the sustainability of this important crop. But we're also going to be talking about other aspects, such as the conditions, the medical conditions themselves, the BPH, and what it's like actually to live with that condition, and the efforts that a good quality extract made from saw palmetto extract and not the green berry powder are going to have an impact. And so, to be sure, we will address efficacy, substantiated saw palmetto extracts versus that unsubstantiated green berry powder. We're going to be talking again about the purity. We will certainly be answering questions about adulteration and the different extraction techniques that are seen on the market, some that have been linked towards good science, such as our CO2 extraction, versus other extractions where there's really no linkage to a positive science. And all of this really sums up to the sustainability efforts that we at Valensa are taking as our mandate. We want to protect this crop. We want to protect these berries, and we are supporting the state efforts for current processes and those policies that are evolving as well to help to protect this crop. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about the education initiatives that we're doing at the university level, to the grower level, and ultimately to the harvesters, because we're really involved with all phases of that. And with that, I want to thank you very much for spending the time, and if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. US Plus is the gold standard of saw palmetto extracts. We are certified from Florida. It meets or exceeds the USP monograph. It is non-GMO. And when you order this product as a company that buys the raw material, or if you're a consumer that's buying with our extracts inside it, you will know, and your customers will know, that there's no adulteration going on. There's no green powder, which is linked towards no substantiation. And you will absolutely positively know that only the best in extraction techniques have been used on this product. Summing it up, GEMS is our commitment to purity, efficacy, traceability, and sustainability.